Monster High. It came, it saw, it conquered. Regardless of how you feel about Monster High, it's undeniable that it completely changed the toy industry. It dominated sales, and a lot of its perks, such as full articulation and a strong character-based storyline, became standard for fashion dolls to have, or else they couldn't even hope to compete with Mattel's plastic behemoth of a franchise. With Monster High announcing its 2022 comeback, I thought it would be fun to look back at the more identifiable ways that it influenced the fashion doll market. Specifically, I want to give an overview of some doll lines that were inspired by Monster High, or in some cases were made specifically to compete with them. First, a disclaimer. The purpose of this video isn't to make fun of these dolls or imply that it's a bad thing that they were inspired by something else. The time when Monster High was dominating the market was such an interesting and unique era for toys, so I thought it would be fun to shine the spotlight on some that might have gone under your radar. Also, Monster High does not own the concept of monster teenagers or even a monster-themed high school, as there were plenty of properties with similar concepts that far predated. Also, I won't really be talking about the cheap dollar store knockoffs, as hilarious as they are, because there's just way too many and not enough information behind them. So, without further ado, let's take a look at some doll lines inspired by Monster High. Mystics, produced by Playhut of Mr. Cat's fame, is really the first line I remember being widely recognized for being very clearly inspired by Monster High, and out of all the lines on this list, the inspiration in them is probably the most clear. The bodies and faces aren't identical, but they are extremely similar in terms of this appearance and aesthetic. There were a few iterations of Mystics, vampires, zombies, Rococo zombies, and Grimm, but all had the same unusual gimmick.
Oh my god, what is that? Oh my god! What is that?
Each doll came with a head that had two faces on either side and wigs that could be swapped out. The concept was that the characters would have a normal version and a monster version that they could be transformed into via turning the head around. Their slogan was actually, "The doll you can change the face of." Despite the unique concept, the line's ambition clearly outsold its actual ability. There were some nice outfit pieces here and there, but for the most part, the manufacturer seemed to misunderstand what it was about Monster High that made it so appealing in the first place. The quality was generally pretty poor, the dolls looked nothing like the box art, and a lot of consumers found the heads to be off-putting and lacking functionality. There were only 4 characters to account for the fact Playhut was only ever willing to trademark the names Siva, Azra, Kalani, and Talon, and the storyline behind the dolls was flimsy at best. They did actually attempt to make accompanying webisodes, but only got up to episode 2, which is probably for the best. I haven't heard anything about Playhut since the Mystics brand kind of fell through. I think they're focusing on making children's tents and outdoor play structures now. I couldn't really find a solid answer to what exactly happened to them. Space Pop is a 2016 animated series created by Genius Brands that ran in a series of short webisodes on YouTube. The story revolves around 5 alien princesses disguising themselves as a girl band in order to form a resistance against the evil empress that took over their planets. To promote the series, the fashion dolls of the main 5 characters were produced by Madame Alexander in 2017. This is interesting because before then, Madame Alexander was mainly known for collectible childlike dolls with a classic porcelain kind of aesthetic. They ventured into the world of Playline fashion dolls before, but this was a very new look for them. The main characters were Rhea, the wisecracking know-it-all, Juno, the punk rock rebel, Athena, who is mature and intelligent, Hera, the free-spirited sweetheart, and Luna, the spoiled girly girl. They may not be monsters, per se, but their colorful skin tones, the slender articulated bodies, and the slight inhuman features clearly took notes from Monster High and was hoping to draw fans of Mattel's franchise. I personally think that it also conspicuously lifted some plot points from Lollyrock, another girls' franchise that was pretty popular at the time. Genius Brands clearly intended for Space Pop to be a huge multimedia franchise that would spawn tons of merchandise, but unfortunately it failed to meet expectations. The series finished Season 1 with a respectable 108 episodes, but Season 2 was never produced and the brand was abandoned in favor of more lucrative projects. I remember Space Pop getting a fair amount of attention when it was first announced, and it did definitely attract some collectors who were hungry for Monster High-like content following the 2016 reboot, but it failed to garner a dedicated fan base and excitement for it quickly fizzled out. Nowadays, Genius Brands is behind the successful Nick Jr. animated series Rainbow Rangers, and Madame Alexander has almost entirely returned to their more traditional style of dolls. Twilight Teens were launched by Simba Toys in 2013. They used the same faces and bodies as Supermodels, another line of theirs. Like Monster High, it featured characters that represented a certain type of classic monster, with names that were somehow even more on the nose than Monster High's were. The first assortment was Zombia, Ghostilla, Goolivia, and Snakey, but Goolivia was dropped after the first line, presumably due to being very similar in appearance to Zombia. They would go on to release a few playsets, a car, a scooter, and a coffin-shaped wardrobe, and then a few other fashion-themed lines. One such actually drew a small amount of controversy as it depicted the teenage characters as brides. They released 3 more characters in 2014, Panthera, Vooduna, and Pneumonia, but the line ended there. At this point in time, Simba had a reputation for making low-budget alternatives to popular dolls, so their answer to Monster High came as no surprise. To this day, they're still going strong with their version of Barbie, Steffi Love. Zombie Girls by Jack Pacific are from 2013. They used the same bodies as the Wings Club dolls they were making at the time, and as evidenced by the name, rather than a wide variety of monsters, the girls are all zombies. These were actually somewhat more morbid than Monster High in some ways, with skin being painted to have a definite corpse-like quality, and their display stands featuring headstones that have the year of their birth and death. An interesting detail though is that the characters are all from different decades and dress accordingly. Mary Morning from 1963, her headstone reads, "Best and Last Sleepover." Maya Spirit died in 1971 after she cheered too hard. Rhoda Kill danced till she dropped in 1985. And Sunny Burns was eye candy to everyone and everything until 1993. There was a budget version of each girl as well, with less accessories and articulation. The line was pretty short-lived and was discontinued shortly after the initial launch, though, due to low sales. Another zombie line, but with a fairy tale twist this time. Once Upon a Zombie was produced by WowWee in 2013 to tie in with a book series written by Billy Phillips and Jenny Nissenson. The plot revolved around a zombie plague that swept through the fairy tale universe and turned all the prominent characters into zombies. I didn't read the books, so I can't speak for them, but I remember the dolls being pretty highly praised by collectors. It actually had a pretty dedicated following, but I guess it wasn't enough because the line ended pretty abruptly. Doing some research, it seems like the production of the dolls was pretty rocky. The company that manufactured them, WowWee, actually dropped the brand entirely shortly after the release, saying that Once Upon a Zombie had strayed from their core values. The book series was intended to be a trilogy, but only 2 books were ever published and only 1 doll from the anticipated second wave of characters was ever released. The first wave consisted of Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Belle, Rapunzel, Snow White, and The Little Mermaid. The second wave only consisted of Alice, but was meant to include Peter Pan, Prince Charming, Tinkerbell, Tanika, who is the Princess and the Pea, and most regrettably, Pocahontas. Yeah, definitely for the best that doll was never made. They also apparently intended to make Pinocchio and a Snow Queen doll at some point. While they were definitely hoping to draw in the Monster High crowd, I think the most evident inspiration from Once Upon a Zombie is Disney princesses. Some characters were very clearly derivative of the Disney characters, which is probably why they thought Pocahontas was a fairy tale character, so I wouldn't be surprised if one reason for the brand's demise was legal trouble with Disney. Speaking of Disney, they produced Attractionistas in 2015 to be sold exclusively at the Disney parks. As evidenced by their name, each character was themed after a different iconic Disney attraction. I think the Monster High inspiration is very evident in their colorful skin tones and the stylized screenings, but the core concept definitely sets them apart. 8 characters were made in total. Maddie for the Mad Tea Party attraction. Interestingly, she was also pretty heavily compared to the Ever After High character of the same name. Celeste for Space Mountain, Gracie for the Haunted Mansion, Pearl for Pirates of the Caribbean, Carrie for the Fantasyland Carousel, Nellie for Jungle Cruise, Holly for the Tower of Terror, and Briar for Splash Mountain. I think these were pretty cute, but I can see why they weren't a big hit for collectors. Though they were sold online as well, most collectors were put off by the exclusivity and didn't feel that the rather high Disney Parks price tag matched their overall quality. If you're interested in these though, most are pretty easy to find cheap on the secondhand market. Holly and Briar, unfortunately though, are pretty pricey. Last but not least, MGA's answer to Mattel's success, Bratzellis. When these were first announced in 2012, it was actually a pretty huge controversy thanks to the rivalry between the two companies. A lot of fans accused MGA of attempting to copy Monster High, and while I don't think that's necessarily true, I also don't think it's inaccurate to say Bratzellis wouldn't exist if not for Monster High.
Well, here's the tea.
Rather than focusing on a high school for monsters, Bratzellis instead revolves around a school exclusively for witches. The main 5 characters, Cloetta, Sashabella, Yasmina, Jade, and Megana, are all cousins to their respective Bratz characters, which I always found to be a really awkward way of tying the line to the Bratz canon. Why they didn't just make it an AU featuring the actual main characters, I'll never know. That said, the Bratzellis characters all have their own personality, style, and a specific witchy power. Yasmina Clairvoya can see into the future, Cloetta Spalletta can transform people and objects, Megana Broomsticks can fly, Sashabella Pauls can talk with animals, and Jay Jador can heal broken hearts. As far as the actual dolls go, they were actually pretty great. Bratzellis set themselves apart from both Bratz and Monster High by having these gorgeous inset eyes. It made for some interesting manufacturing errors occasionally, but for the most part, the eyes were definitely a big appeal of the dolls. The fashions were pretty well designed too, and definitely stuck pretty firmly to the whole dark academia, spooky school aesthetic they wanted. Throughout the brand's run, they definitely followed in Monster High's footsteps in a lot of ways, which only added fuel to the fandom wars. They had a cafe playset, a budget beach line, and a dance line as their initial secondary lines, and even had a concept that was very similar to Monster High's Create a Monster, called Switch a Witch. Unfortunately, MGA put the Bratz franchise as a whole on a hiatus in 2014 in order to work on reinventing the brand. This included Bratzellis, so the line was cut prematurely, arguably during the period when the dolls were at their best. One of their final lines, Back to Magic, is actually one of the most highly sought after lines to this day. And that was 7 doll lines inspired by Monster High. Thank you so much for watching. If you have a favorite, or if you think there's one I missed, definitely let me know down in the comments. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe and let me know what to cover in the future. Thank you.